Alrighty, everyone. Hopefully you had a good break. It was much needed for me. I just want to welcome you back to the grant conference, the 2021 virtual grant conference. We have had two amazing presentations so far. Definitely have been engaging and enlightening. And I've just been excited to see all of the interaction with all of the participants. So I'm encouraging you to continue to add your comments and your humor and continue to ask questions. Moving forward, we have a wonderful session that I kind of deemed compliance, but it's kind of pre-award as well. And we have three of our colleagues from the University of Georgia that are joining us today, and they're talking about foreign influence, identifying, documenting, and disclosing foreign influence at the proposal stage. I can't tell you how important this is. This is a hot topic. It's certainly relevant to what we're seeing going on in the world today with definitely a lot of foreign countries trying to influence different things, whether it's elections, research, anything, right? So I'm going to turn it over to you all. Just a few housekeeping items before I do. If you'd like to join the grant group on LinkedIn, it's the Georgia Research Administrators Network. Look it up on LinkedIn. Gail Spat also put a link to the group in the chat, and I'm certain that she'll put it in there again, that you can go directly to the group and join. Also, presentations will be made available after the session to all registered participants, but I'm going to also include those presentations in the chat here shortly for this particular presentation. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'm going to turn it over to Jenna, Kathy, and Dan.
Thanks so much, Erica. Hi, everyone. My name is Kathy Cuppett. I am the Director of Sponsored Projects Pre-Award at the University of Georgia. I wanted to thank Erica and Columbus State University for having us today and congratulate them on having such a wide and diverse number of institutions and people at the conference. While we were on break, I went back and scrolled through everyone who said good morning at 9 o'clock. We have people spanning 10 time zones today, all the way from Free State University in South Africa to University of Alaska in Fairbanks. When I agreed to present at the Georgia Research Administrative Network conference online this year, I did not anticipate we would have such a huge group, and I'm so excited for everyone to be here. Also presenting with me today are Dan Runge, our Export Compliance Officer, and Jenna Jones, our Proposal Manager. Jenna, do you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I'm excited to be here. My name is Jenna Jones, and I am the Proposal Manager in Sponsored Projects Administration Pre-Award at the University of Georgia. I have spent my entire research administration career here at UGA, go Dogs, and I have been in this line of profession for 11 years. I started at our data entry position and moved through the ranks over the past 11 years. So I fell into it like most of us do, but found my niche, and it's been a wonderful experience, and I'm looking forward to continuing my career in this growing and diverse field.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Dan Runge. I'm Export Compliance Officer in the Office of Research Integrity and Safety here at UGA. That's kind of my primary role. I'm also the Associate REO, so I also help our Research Integrity Officer with misconduct-related matters. And kind of shoehorned into that the last few years has been reviewing financial conflicts of interest in research and helping out a little bit with some of the outside activity approval processes here at UGA, which also kind of relates to undue foreign influence. I've been here 7 years. I'm a lawyer by training, and I'm enjoying my time here in Georgia, except for when the tree pollen is crazy.
Yeah, I can sympathize with that. I'm, like I said, Kathy Cuppett. I'm the Director of Sponsored Projects Pre-Award, which is a little bit of a misnomer. We actually do all the administrative parts of sponsored projects, from proposal development all the way through closeout. And as testament to what Dan said this morning, my black car was a nice shade of chartreuse from all the fun pollen out there. Yeah, so I'm excited to get into this. I agree with Erica that this is a bit of a compliance focused presentation, but like so many things in research administration, it's really a team sport. So it takes a lot of collaboration between the faculty member, between our compliance officers, whether they be export control, conflicts of interest, or foreign influence, and the research administrators, both at the departmental level and in the central office, to really identify and refocus that faculty members' maybe previous conceived notions of what other support, what foreign activities means in their proposals. About 2 years ago, the National Science Foundation and the National Institute of Health both issued updates to their existing guidance. They don't consider it rule changes, they just consider it re-emphasizing the types of things they were looking for. And for myself personally, it was a big shift in what I thought about needed to be disclosed in those current and pending documents, in those other support documents. And so our focus at University of Georgia has really been to sort of help reframe what people think of when they need to disclose in a proposal, and then collaborate together as a team in order to make sure that all of the things we need to tell an agency about the contacts, about the funding, about any kind of support that a researcher receives is included in those proposals or later in those progress report updates. So what are we going to talk about today? Today, we're going to go through just a basic definition of what foreign influence is, why the government cares about it, and why we're not really trying to discourage foreign influence at all. In fact, it makes all of our research better. We just want to make sure that we talk about it in the right way, that we disclose it to those agencies. We're going to take a deep dive into the agency requirements for both the National Science Foundation and the National Institute of Health. We're going to talk specifically about what kind of things should you keep your eye out for in a proposal that might lead you to say, hey, we need to ask some more questions about this to make sure we're capturing everything we need to capture in the disclosures. We're also going to talk a little bit about progress reports, which allow for a second chance to go ahead and disclose some of these things, whether they be due to changing circumstances or the realization that some other piece of data or background information is being used in your publications and in your project. And then we have some additional resources to share with all of you. And we're going to take questions at the end. So I'm going to turn it over to Dan to talk a little bit about what is foreign influence.
All right, thank you, Kathy. So I think the first thing we want to emphasize is the idea of undue foreign influence, right? We value international collaborations. We value kind of the global research setting. But what the federal government and federal sponsors have been concerned with is undisclosed foreign influence. So these can be ties to foreign universities, companies, and governments. This would include if someone is has a visiting appointment or an adjunct appointment at a foreign institution, maybe a research scientist in the summer at a company abroad. This also includes uncompensated things like unfunded access to equipment and space, or visiting adjunct appointments that don't have funding. Those two kind of fall into that kind of other support bucket. And then collaborations with people in institutions located outside of the U.S. So this is kind of the foreign component bucket. And the concern really is with funding research where senior and key personnel have not disclosed these activities, right? So I think from the sponsor's point of view, they want to know about other support, know about foreign components, so that they can assess whether there would be undue foreign influence in these activities. There's been a lot of emphasis in particular with foreign government talent recruitment programs. So the basic idea is, a foreign government recruiting US-based researchers to receive appointments or funding, lab space, lab resources in foreign countries, with the expectation there that there's a kind of an undue transfer of research materials, items, information to that foreign government. So again, the big concern here is with lack of disclosure of these particular ties. Next slide, please, Kathy. So when these, the guidance, I think, first came out about 3 years ago, you know, the NIH in particular identified kind of 3 key areas. So there's concerns about diversion of intellectual property rights. So, you know, the US government doesn't want to fund US research that then gets kind of siphoned off to foreign entities. And then breaches of the peer review confidentiality process. So there have been examples of you know, researchers who disclose proprietary information, disclose proposal applications outside of the peer review process. So that breach of confidentiality has been a concern. And then, you know, specifically in the sponsored project space, knowing about competing time commitments of senior and key personnel and undisclosed funding sources, where there may be an undue influence from a foreign entity in those projects. And then broadly speaking, you know, foreign influence kind of falls under a national security, economic and trade interest bucket where, you know, the FBI in particular, when they've talked about undue foreign influence, mentions academic espionage and making sure that things are just appropriately shared internationally. And then there's kind of an overlap with potential export controls or contract terms and conditions that might relate to whether or not there can be, you know, foreign components of particular research projects. Next slide, please, Kathy.
So Dan, before we hop to our next slide, we have a poll question.
All right.
So we're asking people, do you know what office or person to contact in regards to foreign influence and export control issues at your university? Now that you know what they are and you've identified some of them, we're just curious how many of you engage in this process and know who to talk to.
And it may be your conflicts of interest or outside activity office too. It might also be some institutions have research security offices where they've kind of put export controls, undue foreign influence, classified work under a kind of a research security umbrella. But the important part is to kind of understand who should be talking to each other at your institution when these issues may arise. And then there's also potentially a research integrity issue if we identify the lack of disclosure, right? So some institutions may treat that as a responsible conduct of research issue that needs to be assessed.
All right, so with just about 55%, our number one issue, or our number one answer is yes, people do know who to contact with export control and foreign influence. The takeaway we hope you guys take from this is that if you don't know who to contact at your specific institution, is that you go ahead and do this outreach. It's so important. Like I mentioned at the beginning, it really is a team endeavor. Once you know what the answers to the questions or the components of the proposal that have some sort of foreign influence, which we will hop into that in a second, you want to make sure that you talk about those with either your export control office, a conflict of interest officer, all of those kind of things that Dan just mentioned. All right.
So I think to put a pin in the very kind of 35,000 feet overview of what foreign influence is just to reemphasize that foreign collaborations, you know, strengthen the research enterprise. You know, at UGA, we're not trying to discourage any foreign components, discourage other support, but what we're trying to do is encourage folks to understand when they have to be kind of disclosed and be open and transparent about who's participating in the proposal, other support that senior and key personnel may have, so that there's that timely disclosure to the sponsor so that the sponsor can really decide what to do with that information. And that also ties into, you know, disclosing outside activities to the institution as well. Right? That's a key component of this, is if your institution has an outside activity approval process, hopefully you can identify foreign influence before it gets to the point where you're actually having to tell the sponsor about it. So maybe the institution has taken its look at those outside activities and had an initial review at that institutional level and approved those as well. But think the big takeaway is open, transparent disclosures to sponsors, but a continued, respect for and healthy motivation to have, international activities.
All right, I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit about the specific proposal requirements for NSF that drive some of their compliance with foreign influence. So in July of 2019, again, NSF considers this an update, not a change in policy and procedure. So they released a Dear Colleague letter that gave the research community their NSF stance on this issue. The biggest takeaway from that colleague letter was the actual change of talent recruitment program prohibition. Specifically, the colleague letter says that participation for NSF employees or those on an IPA are restricted from participating in these talent recruitment programs. So then the question becomes, why? Why was that so important? What is happening that makes that restriction real? Why do we have to do this? Why should we know that? So NSF tells us that risk of participation in this program is for inappropriate foreign influence in NSF policy, programs, and their priorities, including the merit review process, which Dan had alluded to prior. So that's where NSF's concern stemmed from. Now you may be thinking to yourself, okay, well, the proposal I'm looking at is not an NSF employee, and it's not for an investigator of mine that's on an IPA. We're just submitting a research proposal. So what do I do? What do I need to know? What should I be concerned with? So the policy award, proposal and award policy procedure guide, I call it the PAC guide, lays out which sections of the proposal are going to identify for us potential foreign influence. And NSF released updates that say, hey, we've had this policy in place for a long time, but we're going to clarify this for you and expand it and say, we also need to know about these other things. This has been a common trend. We aren't being notified about this from the research community, so we need to know about these things. So biosketches is our first area where we're going to be able to help our investigators identify other areas or other things that they need to disclose. From a UGA perspective, what we're trying to do is we're trying to ask questions of our investigators. We're trying to focus their thinking in a more broad way. A lot of times our investigators are like, oh, I have submitted thousands of NSF proposals. I'm going to update my biosketch really quickly, and we're going to be ready to go. And sometimes that's okay, but sometimes they may not be thinking in broad enough terms to really encapsulate what NSF is saying that they want. So for the people at UGA who submit proposals, which is in the central office as well as our departmental staff, we try to ask questions that say, hey, on your biosketch, this is the guideline from NSF, but in layman's terms, here's what that means. Here's our interpretation of this. Rather than just copying and pasting a potentially confusing guideline from an agency, we're going to tell them, here's what they're looking for, and here's the why. And having that kind of a conversation with an investigator also kind of opens them up to think of, oh, maybe I haven't considered my non-funded appointments. That's a common thing that we see where they're thinking, okay, this is my current appointment. This is the job I had before that. This is the job that I had before that. And I was a postdoc. But they may not be thinking about, oh, I have an honorary appointment at UK in Liverpool. Who knows? So we try to ask those questions to broaden their thinking, to get them thinking about things that they may not have traditionally put on these documents, to kind of help them get this thing in a way that we can get it submitted and make sure that we're doing our due diligence to disclose what the agency has required us to disclose. Next slide, please. Okay, current and pending support. For us in sponsored projects, our scope of our investigators' work is fairly narrow in the grand scheme of things. We here at UGA, we can see their proposals that they've submitted that we haven't received a funding decision on. We can see their funded awards. We can see their pre-proposals. We can see all of their sponsored projects. Things that we cannot see, we depend on the investigators to disclose to us, such as gifts, in-kind resources, such as lab space, equipment, supplies, and in other areas of remuneration that they need to disclose, we may not have direct access to that. So again, we're going to ask questions. We're going to engage in a conversation. We're going to open ourselves up to be in a collaborative environment with our investigator. And again, not discourage them or say, if you disclose this, it's wrong, just to encourage them to think outside of the box. For example, a lot of investigators do editing work. If an investigator did editing work for a foreign journal and received compensation for that editing work, we should put that on a current and pending support document. We should disclose that to the sponsor. We should tell them this happened. It doesn't mean it was wrong. It doesn't mean that there's a penalty. It just means we should tell the sponsor. The sponsors want to know what our investigators are doing, especially with foreign entities. So it's our job to do our due diligence, make sure that we ask those questions, and submit the most complete proposal documents that we can. All right.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, Jenna. That's such a great example of where collaboration with your conflict of interest office, as well as your export control office, where they might have confirmation of some of those disclosures already. Or if they don't, making sure then that they do the conflict of interest, significant financial interest disclosures at that point.
Okay, so we also want to disclose to NSF our international activities. This is done in several areas of an NSF proposal. For example, if we have foreign travel in our budget, we have to mark our cover sheet with international activities, disclose our country that we're countries that we're traveling to if known. So we're also going to see potential foreign influence in our facilities documents. That's where we're going to document in-kind space, unfunded collaborations. If there's unfunded personnel that's foreign, we wouldn't be able to discuss those in our budget or justification, but those are going to be in the facilities documents. The investigator's COA table, where they're going to list their people they've authored papers with, other investigators that they've worked with. They're going to have to, it requires them to say they're affiliated with this entity. So there's a potential that we're going to see foreign collaboration on that COA table as well. And we need to make sure that that's clear, it's documented, and the investigator has listed everybody that's related to this so that we meet all of those requirements. And again, we're going to be asking questions. Hey, I noticed you have this thing and it just says France. Could you tell us what university in France or what entity? Is it a company? What are we looking for? So we're screening those documents to really spur a conversation, to expand our investigators' thinking, and for us to be able to offer them the most sound advice we can to make sure that their proposal is successful and the research is conducted in the manner that is up to par with the agency requirements, the university requirements, and federal and state law.
So we do have a poll question. Have you submitted a proposal to NSF with a foreign component? All right. Oh, it's already sharing. Okay, sorry. Thanks, Erica. I clicked share at the same time you did, I think. Have you submitted a proposal to NSF with a foreign component? About 19% of you have either worked on or submitted a proposal with a foreign component, which is very cool. It is much more common to not have foreign components in your NSF proposals, so it's not surprising that 44% of you have not done that. If you don't work on or submit proposals, it makes perfect sense that you would not have submitted a proposal with a foreign component. If you aren't sure, then I would encourage you next time you have an NSF proposal to talk with other research administrators on your campus, or perhaps someone you've met here. Obviously, it can be difficult if you are battling with a last minute submission, like we talked about, both Roxanne and Lindsay covered in the previous presentation. But if you do get things far enough ahead of time, it's absolutely something that you want to look into. It is always better to disclose these things up front than to have an agency come back to you and say, we saw a publication that has a co-author from a university in Germany, and there is no foreign component on your NSF proposal. All right. So I'm going to talk about the NIH requirements, and before I do that, I'm also going to have a polling question about have you submitted a proposal to NIH with a foreign component. We'll give you guys a couple minutes to answer that, or seconds, sorry, not minutes. All right, and a little bit different split on this one. So 35% of you have submitted a proposal to NIH with a foreign component, whereas 30% of you have not. Still roughly the same amount are not submitting, which makes perfect sense. And then 1% is not sure. Again, reach out to your fellow research administrators, talk to your compliance offices, pending the amount of time you have. And hopefully when we get towards the end of this slide about where you would look to see if there is a foreign component, as well as our questions to ask investigators, will help you readily identify those. So what does NIH say about other support and foreign influence in a proposal? So just like NSF, NIH released some additional guidance. They do not consider this a change in their policy, but they do consider it a clarification. They issued this in July of 2019. There are 4 basic questions and then a 5th area that they request information on other support at the just-in-time phase of proposals. They also ask for this information after award to be included if there are any changes since the proposal time during RPPR and technical reporting deadlines. So what are those 4 areas? What they ask specifically about are going to be appointments, resources, activities, award amounts and time commitments, which are the standard thing that we have all historically thought about as other support. It's going to be those sponsored project proposals and awards and their time commitments. And then there is specific information about a foreign component of the specific project that you are proposing. So let's talk a little bit about what each of these things are. So for the appointments itself, NIH asks that you list all positions and scientific appointments, both domestic and foreign, held by senior and key people on the project. It's important to think about not only funded positions, like obviously the appointment they have with your institution, but also unfunded positions. They may have an honorary position or an adjunct position with another institution or with another lab. It could be not even with an institute of higher education, but it could be with a company. It could be with a nonprofit. It could be with a lab or an institute as opposed to a university. This is going to include even some faculty members teach for a month in the summer at other institutions. They are paid directly to do that, or perhaps they go and visit unpaid to another institution over the summer. Those aren't appointments that you would necessarily know about as an employee of the university. Those are questions you're going to want to talk to those faculty members about and make sure that they understand that that is part of this conversation. Even if the payment was for just last summer and now you're submitting to that October deadline, if they taught abroad over the summer, you want to make sure to include that in their other support at Just in Time. In addition to appointments, NIH is very interested in resources. So they want all the resources for all the senior and key people, whether those senior and key people are paid on the project or not. Remember, NIH defines senior and key people not just as PIs and co-investigators, but anyone who is contributing to the scientific development or execution of the project in a substantive, measurable way. They do not have to be paid on the project. They can be senior and key people anyway. You want to make sure that all of those people are providing information about other resources that they have, whether they are domestic or foreign, to support their research. This is going to be where Jenna gave the example of outside work. An outside activity that is not paid through the university or the institute that you are working at, but instead is paid directly to that faculty member or that key person. That's the kind of information that they're going to have that you're not going to have. That could be consulting work related to their research. That could be editing a journal. It could be any of those kinds of things. It can also be non-compensated monetary resources. So perhaps they have access to a piece of equipment or to a data set that they are going to use in their research. All of these things are kinds of things that you want to make sure that you disclose during this just-in-time period. In addition to resources, NIH is very interested in activities. So activities sound a lot like the normal other support you might think of, but it's actually a little bit different. It gets a little bit deeper into that foreign financial support. It's going to be research or laboratory personnel, perhaps someone visiting your lab. It could also be lab space that you have access to in another country. It could be scientific material, data. How would you know this? You might, scientific material and data, you could have an MTA, for example, that governs the exchange of that. It's a good thing to talk to whoever at your institution manages MTAs, or even prompt the faculty member you're speaking with, the PI. Do you have an MTA with any foreign institutions? Are you using any of that? Are you using any of that in this research? You want to make sure that they include that on the other support. NIH is actively looking at publications to see, are you publishing on awards? Are you publishing on NIH projects and listing foreign co-authors? And they will come back and ask questions about it. Finally, on the other support, they do also want to know about award and time commitments. They're looking for the dollar amounts of any awards, as well as the person months committed to the project, even if they're partial person months for each year. That is the standard sponsored project commitment that they're looking for, what we traditionally think of as current and pending support. In addition, there is a foreign component disclosure requirement. So NIH defines a foreign component very specifically. It's the existence of any scientific element or segment of a project outside of the United States. So that can be performance of work by a researcher or recipient in a foreign location, even if it's not directly funded by NIH. Or it can be performance of work by a researcher in a foreign location employed or paid by the foreign organization, whether or not NIH grant funds are expended. So they could be a subcontract or they could be an unfunded collaborator. The most important takeaway from this is make sure you disclose it if it does meet this definition. But if it doesn't meet this definition exactly, it's most likely going to fall under that other support category and should be disclosed as other support. Because even if it is a situation where, for example, we had a situation at the University of Georgia where NIH reached back out to us after award during the RPPR because we had a German co-author on a publication. They had questions, and what it was we needed to disclose that we had used data during a pilot project prior to the award of the NIH project. We did not share our data with the German co-authors, but all that needed to happen was the disclosure that yes, we shared data and information they shared with us before the project was funded. And so we have this resulting publication. It's really important that you talk through these things with your faculty members. Faculty members don't often think about sharing data with foreign collaborators as a foreign component, but it absolutely is. So you want to make sure you get those questions in there. I think we have a question from Gail in the chat. What about researchers who receive an honorarium or travel reimbursement for speaking abroad or to a foreign organization virtually? Are you encouraging them to disclose this? We do at University of Georgia encourage them to disclose that. We ask a number of questions in our electronic research portal that manages all of our proposals and awards that cover this type of thing. We err on the side of disclosure as opposed to holding something back from NIH or NSF. We feel like they've been specific enough in their outreach that they really do want to know all of these things. All right, so what should we be checking for at proposal review? I'm going to turn over to Jenna.
Right, thanks, Kathy. So again, to kind of recap what we've talked about in the prior slides, where are the documents in a proposal where we're most likely to see foreign components or have a conversation point with our investigator, and where should we disclose in a proposal these foreign components? So again, for NSF, we're going to have our cover page. We're going to document international activities there. For NIH, when we're doing the grants.gov application documents, we're going to have research site locations. We're going to have one for us. We're going to have others available for subs or other locations that we need to disclose. Any of those that are foreign, that's going to trigger some more conversations that we need to have to make sure our documents are up to par. Current and pending, other support in our COA tables, those are going to tell us if our investigators are working with foreign individuals, have they co-authored a paper. Other support's going to tell us, oh, I've got this other thing happening over here. Maybe I did some consulting work with a foreign entity over the summer, or whatever may have happened. And same with our current and pending. It's going to tell us, here's all of our sponsored projects. Oh, I got a gift from a foreign entity, and here's the information about that. So again, we err on the side of disclosure. This is the place we're going to do it. Our bio sketch is going to tell us about all of their appointments. It can also tell us about publications and co-authors as well, because it does have that publication component in there. And we're going to encourage our investigators to disclose all of their appointments, including the unfunded ones, so that we can make sure we're covering the breadth of information that the sponsor needs from us. Our budget and justification is going to detail funded foreign entities. If we're subcontracting to a foreign entity, we're going to see that in our budget justifications. We're going to get documents from those foreign entities, especially if they're included as a funded sub. So we're definitely going to have a forward-facing disclosure there about a foreign component at that point. Letters of collaboration can also show us that. A lot of times our calls are going to say, hey, we want letters of support or letters of collaboration. Even if they're not funded, we want to know who you're working with and what they're doing. So we're going to see foreign components and foreign influence. We're going to be able to disclose those things with a review of those documents as well. Facilities and other resources, that's going to show us, specifically for NSF, all of our unfunded collaborations that are happening. If our investigators have in-kind lab space or equipment, students, whatever it might be, that's the area where they're going to disclose that to avoid any cost share issues and to be in compliance with NSF guidelines. So that's where we're going to see our foreign components in our proposals. Oh, we have a question about what is a COA table? That is a great question. The acronyms abound, and I am very guilty of just throwing them out willy-nilly. So I'm glad you asked that question. So a COA table is collaborators and other affiliations table. It is a template document that is required for the National Science Foundation, and it lists out all collaborators, other affiliations that our investigator have, co-authors, people that they've worked on research projects with, and it's broken up into 5 separate tables. And I can't remember what those elements are off the top of my head, but I will be happy to send a link in the chat that gives you further information about that, and I will go get it for you right now.
Okay, and we also have Millie Lesko with her hand up.
Oh.
Millie, I think you can unmute and ask a question.
I have unmuted, but I accidentally raised my hand. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, no, that's okay. All right, well, I do want to add just real quick before we get into all these questions and the documents that we look at, just like you can look there to see if there might be something that is a foreign thing to disclose, as evidenced by like a sub to University of Liverpool on your budget. This is also the place, if you know there needs to be a foreign disclosure, you want to check all of these areas to make sure we are making the disclosure appropriately. These are all the areas that University of Georgia checks. I realize that this is specific to UGA. Different institutions have different levels of risk, and I want to keep that in mind as we move towards what are the specific questions that we ask during our proposal review.
Yeah, so some of these, Kathy had mentioned that this is kind of a team effort. So I think we've got 5 examples on our screen of some of the questions that we ask. There's an overlap here between, what I've liked to see from an export control perspective and what may help the grant staff identify a foreign component that may not otherwise be highlighted in some of those other documents. So I think the first bullet, it's a great question to ask, very open-ended. It might get your investigators to, think of something that might not be in some of those other proposal documents, some of those formal documents that follow those sponsor requirements. So asking about dual adjunct or visiting appointments, affiliations outside of the U.S., even if you're not paid. That broad general question allows the grant staff and the investigator really to have an opportunity on an open-ended basis to identify something that maybe they didn't recognize in some other documents. Then we ask, the access to space equipment or data outside the U.S. Unfunded collaborators are a good question to ask. Travel outside of the U.S. And subs outside of the U.S. So, for me, I think 2 or 3 of those are kind of specific export control questions that also can be utilized to identify foreign components otherwise. And from an export control perspective, it allows me to see, if there's a risk in the project for some type of transfer or collaboration that we have to manage. Next slide, Kathy.
Oh, this is me again. Sorry. Okay, we're gonna shift a little bit here. So what happens if we didn't disclose something in a proposal, or there's been an update to an award? A really good example is a publication happens as a result of some science. Our investigator publishes a really great paper and they have a foreign author. Do we tell at that point? How do we do it? So one of the things that the progress report will allow us to do is another opportunity to say, we have a foreign component here, or we need to tell you about this. Oftentimes it is a result of the actual work that's happened. Proposal is our best guess of what we're going to do. Then the award comes and the science starts to happen, and sometimes things shift, or the experiments lead the investigators in a different direction, and the results can be a little different than what we thought was going to happen at proposal time. Or there's an expertise that we need to get. We need to work with this person. They are the best. And maybe they're a foreign collaborator. So we need to tell our sponsor, hey, here's what happened. We're working with this person. We co-authored something with these people, and they were foreign. So the progress report allows us to do that. And it's encouraged that we do that. We should disclose those things in this method to let our sponsors know this is what is happening with our project now. And we always, in doubt, talk with the people at your university who do this work, whether it's export control, if it's a compliance office, research integrity office, whatever it might be. We encourage you to work with them. As Kathy said, this is a team sport. I certainly don't hold all the answers here, but when I get to a point where I don't know what to do, I know where to go. And I know that I can reach out to Dan, I can reach out to Kathy, I can figure out what I need to do to move forward and make something happen for an investigator, or help them do the right thing, be on the right path. We always want to do our due diligence. We want to give the best advice we can, and we want to tell our sponsors, hey, this is what's happening, and here's why. And 9 times out of 10, we tell them everything's fine. They may have questions, but the real issue is not disclosing or hiding. That's where we get into real issues and real trouble. We're upfront, we're honest, we're open. We answer the questions to the best of our ability. We encourage our investigators to do the same, and we work together as a team to make sure that that happens.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to provide one point of clarification because it has been mentioned in the chat by Jill and Diane, and I completely agree. Those changing circumstances that you might report at our PPR are not going to be that all of a sudden we added a foreign subcontract or subaward and that we are doing work in a foreign location. Rather, it provides you a nice reminder to talk to your PI about, do you feel like things are changing such that we need to do a prior approval request to add a foreign component? You are both absolutely right in the chat that it can be a costly mistake to start to pay for or engage in foreign work without that prior approval on an NIH grant. You absolutely be prior a part in that. The prior portion of prior approval requests is extremely important in this area. So we want to make sure we have these conversations with our faculty members, that they are talking to us up front, and that they realize, based on the conversations we had at proposal time, that should circumstances change and they think they are going to move into a foreign area, add a foreign component, add a foreign collaborator, that we are talking about that beforehand so that we can make those requests appropriately. All right, So a couple additional resources that we wanted to make sure you guys had, and Erica had mentioned previously that she'll be emailing out all of our slideshows. The Federal Demonstration Partnership covered foreign influence pretty heavily in the January 2021 meeting. I've linked both to the slideshow and the presentation video. I found it extremely helpful, and so I wanted to make sure all of you had a copy as well. The Council on Government Relations, COGR, continues to cover foreign influence at many of its meetings. Most recently, it covered the disclosure practices. They did a big survey. They told this presentation that we linked to here is all about the results of that survey. They talked to well over 100 institutions. What are people asking to disclose? What is the information they are gathering, and what are they doing with it? And then we also included 2 websites that we felt provided really good detailed guidance about what to do if there is a foreign component, how you disclose it, when you might disclose it, why we care about it. The University of Minnesota has a guidance on foreign influence page, and then Princeton really focuses on inappropriate foreign influence. They make a nice distinction there about foreign collaboration versus the inappropriate foreign influence that might lead to the type of concerns we covered at the beginning of the presentation, which is theft of intellectual property or inappropriate sharing during the peer review process, things like that. Both websites have a lot of tools on them and are very helpful. So we encourage you to go there and check them out. And we are ready for questions.
Great, so we'll use the same format we've been using. If you guys want to raise your hand, if you have any questions that you'd like to raise before the panel, we'll acknowledge you then and then allow you to unmute yourself. All right, we had some great questions ongoing throughout the chat. Let's see here. I see someone raise their hand. All right, so we have Raji. I'm going to ask Raji to state what organization you're from and unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Raji. I'm from Mass General Hospital in Boston. Nice to meet you all from Georgia. So my question is regarding the foreign components. That's the hot topic now. NIH and NSF and everyone is looking at grants very closely, and the publications also very closely. I have a case study and I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. If one of the foreign components is a student who was not paid but affiliated to the foreign institution and has come to the US and has worked in a PI's lab and thus become a co-author, would that person be considered a foreign national and needs to be, do they need to be disclosed on the project as well as RPPR as well as the biosketch?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I'm going to restate it to make sure I totally understand it. So we're saying if a student at a foreign institution comes to the United States and is a student here in a University of Georgia lab, they are not named on the proposal or the project, but they are a co-author on a paper that comes out of the project. Would we want that to be disclosed? Is that the gist of what you're asking? Yes. Okay. She said yes in the chat. Sorry. Yeah. So I think it really, the first thing we'd want to look at is this person a senior and key person? Are they making a sizable contribution to the science? And certainly being listed as a co-author on a paper might lead evidence to that is happening, in which case we would want to disclose to either NIH or NSF that we have a person who potentially, I mean, we wouldn't want to disclose it until we get to the point of more information. So is this person supported by another country, or are they just a foreign national? And if they were a foreign national, we would want to work with Dan, our export control officer, on any kind of disclosure in that specific situation. I think, Raji, mainly we would be looking to get more information from them about their role on the project, their role in the publication, what they do in the lab, all of those kind of things. Dan, feel free to jump in with any other information you'd be interested from the export control angle.
And you may know more about this. Isn't the foreign component kind of bar being that the component is not inside the United States? Like if the student is here in the US, they're not really a foreign component, are they?
Yeah, and that's why I would want to, so in the time of COVID, we certainly have people who are physically located in other countries that are attending the university and that work on projects. So that's why I'd really want to, thank you for that question, because that stops some of the stumbling I had previously. That is the kind of information that we would want to have to know, is there actually a foreign component, or is this more something we need to disclose for other support? Maybe really what we're doing here is asking to add this person as a senior and key person to the project, as opposed to requesting or apologizing for having a foreign component exist without requesting prior approval for it. Does that make sense? So Raji has added in the chat that they were an unpaid intern. I'm not sure that that makes a difference under NIH's definition of what senior and key people are, or their definition of a foreign component. The definition of foreign component talks about them. It does not require payment on the NIH grants, and they're not required to be paid if they are a senior and key, in order to be considered a senior and key person. It's really about where that work is being conducted and whether they are having a substantial contribution to the science or the work being done.
All right, do we have any other questions? All right, I'm not seeing any at this time. I think everybody's ready for lunch. So here's what we're gonna break for lunch. I know it was originally scheduled from 12 to 1. We kind of went over because I didn't allow for breaks, but now that we've done that, we're going to go ahead and break, and we will return at 1:15 for our session on post-award. But guys, thank you for this presentation on foreign influence. Again, it's timely, another great presentation. Thank you all for your time and joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
All right, so see you guys at 1:15, and we have Josh Rosenberg from Georgia Tech. All right, talk to you later.